Hello and welcome to another edition of Inside the Burrow, the FAU podcast for and by fans. My name is Dan, joined by Jack and Shane as usual. Tonight we are going to break down this past weekend's game against UMass. Probably we're going to talk a little bit about Javion Posey's kind of regression to the mean, if you will. And we'll have somebody from MTSU joining us to discuss this weekend's game. So I guess to get started, we can talk a little bit about, I think that one of the biggest topics certainly is Javion Posey. And after his two kind of real stellar games, this was a game that, frankly, he played like a freshman. I tweeted this out. He played like a freshman against a team that had a week to put film on him, or had a week to study film. So, I think there's you can read into this game as much as you want, but I think it's UMass had a pretty solid game plan. They saw where FAU was weak in offensive line and knew that, if we really challenge Posey to pass and make accurate passes consistently, there was going to be some options. But again, I think the end of the game really broke down to FAU being more talented and being able to make that one or two big plays when needed. Javion Posey with the 70-yard touchdown run, a couple timely interceptions, which we maybe will talk a little bit about later. But again, a win is a win in a COVID year like this. A win is a win. Yes, we've got some things to iron out with Posey. He's got to be better. But I think again, defense was remarkable again. We should probably just do a show completely on how great this defense is doing. And they kind of just get tossed to the side because of quarterback situation. But yeah, Shane, I mean, you had some good observations in your recap on after the game, but what's for the podcast, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, it was kind of expected. It's why, I wanted to hype Posey as well. But, my biggest fear was just some of the missed open guys, kind of completely not seeing them. I pointed out in my piece, the 4th and 7 really bothers me. You kind of just had Jordan Merrill on an out route and he was open, and Posey hits the linebacker in the hands. Those are just kind of the simple ones, right? Redshirt freshman development, all that fun stuff. Played receiver last year. I do understand the fact that, again, Lane played my receiver last year. You still want to be able to hit those throws. If you hits those throws, the running game's enough. I think the O-line just struggled. I mean, I took pictures on my phone. I sit up high at the games so I can kind of see how everything's lined up. I mean, teams talk about 8 in the box. UMass consistently played with 11 within kind of like a cloud coverage, 11 within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. I mean, you can get mad at the O-line, but can't block that. You can't block 2 guys up there. So that was just, just frustrating. I expect the O-line to bounce back. They've been good for the most part this year. But yeah, he's going to have to show something, because this game coming up, we lose with that performance. Asher O'Hare will make enough plays to beat us. Simple as that. And Middle Tennessee is a team that's kind of gotten better throughout the year. And if we struggle through the air that much, they got to make the simple plays. They got to hit TJ Chase on a go route early in the game for 30, 40 yards just to get a safety back there. So, I mean, those are going to be the key things to look for.
Absolutely, Shane. We're going to have to stretch the defense north and south, because we've shown that we cannot handle one of the worst defenses in the nation when they stack 9 guys in the box. And like you said, I mean, those safeties were cheating in almost the entire night. And I mean, it took all the way until Posey on that option, either to the outside to Emmons or him taking it up front, for the safeties to really finally cheat in to the point where he could blow past them, beat them on them being overcompensating for that. Listen, they had 6 sacks, UMass did. They had 2 defensive tackles. One is 6'3", 260. The other is 6'2", 280. They combined for 6 tackles for loss, which is almost half of the 13 T4Ls that we saw last week. So, I mean, the offensive line, they did have their hands full. But like you said, when you have so many guys in the box, there's only so much they can do. But, go on, yeah.
No, yeah, I just said it mostly. It honestly looked like a lot of confusion kind
So
of
much
in that
confusion.
part. Who to get. One guy was going to the second level thinking, and some people were just getting free in the backfield. There are a lot of guys in the box, and that stuff can be coached. You know, Federico Mangers is still young. He's had his great moments this year, and he's also just he's had freshman moments at right guard this year. Nick, you know, you saw kind of the things when they started to try and go fast, the false starts, you know, yeah. You know, I do want to address a couple frustration fans have that we need to relax with. First of all, the calling of the timeouts consistently not to get delayed games, that's part of being a freshman quarterback. You know, there's a lot of times where they're out there and they're looking and guys aren't getting, you know, Posey that time. You can tell he's looking at the sideline, looking indecisive kind of with his calls. Just in the same way as dropping back and being indecisive, sometimes you're indecisive on where you want the guys to line up and who should be in motion. Also, you know, I thought it was really curious in this game, kind of the receiver rotation, right? But let's just be clear. TJ Chase had by far the most snaps at receiver. The slot was even. If you look at Willie Wright, LaJohntay Wester, and Jordan Merrill's snaps, they all had like over between 35 and 41. So they were pretty consistent rotating those guys. And as for the opposite receiver, you know, Brandon Robinson did get the most snaps, twice as many. You know, they did use Willie Taggart and BJ Alexander a little bit out there. I think they like to use Willie Taggart Jr. because one, I think he knows the playbook. And he's pretty fast there. You know, I'm just going to say BJ Alexander hasn't looked explosive as I thought he would be. And, you know, Brandon Robinson's just Mr. Dependable for FAU. And the coaches talk about that all week in their press conferences.
He's become the new John Mitchell almost.
But, yeah, people really wanted to get on Willie Taggart Jr. on that first deep ball, I think, in the second drive of the game, where it seemed like he stopped running.
He lost
and that just seemed – huh?
It looked like he lost it at some point.
Well, yeah, I think there was a miscommunication. Javion Posey was rolling out a little bit. And he threw it deep, you know, just kind of those things. But I will say one positive that I did like. They got Malcolm Davidson had 2 catches.
That was nice.
They got him involved in the passing game. I want to see more of that. Any, you know, a different way to get him involved.
Yeah, if we're not going to utilize those quick bubble screens, I'm a big fan of to Wester or Willie Wright as much as I would like. Then it'd be great to utilize, especially a fast back like Davidson, who's so explosive, on a quick screen to kind of counteract the blitz or the opposing defense is stacking a lot of guys in the box. I want to go back to what you said, Shane, about Posey calling timeouts to avoid delay of games. I agree. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but remember we saw Tronti do that as well early in the season. So I also think it's just maybe a playbook thing in general, because I trust Tronti. I know he knows the field enough. He knows where the play clock is on the field, which is something that's important that not a lot of fans really think about. But again, we gotta think for a second. This is a team that did not have spring ball, hardly had summer ball, and had to take a good amount of time off of fall camp off because of COVID. And they're still 5-1. So there's still going to be some things that they have to work on. So if they need to take a timeout to figure it out, that's no big deal. Take the timeout.
Yeah, I'd rather do that than get Posey in a bad play and he does the catastrophic thing. You know, that's what we got to avoid. Like the fumble on the second drive of the game, you know, where he truly, you know, Posey's biggest thing, as we can tell.
Yeah.
He fumbled versus FIU, had the quote unquote fumble at the 2-yard line. Wasn't, but still close enough. And then on the second drive of that game, he's got to stop being so loose with the football. You know, and that's what concerns me.
And hopefully
week.
That will improve over time, just like how we kind of think his passing should improve over time. But only time will tell. No matter what, the passing game is going to have to improve by this Saturday or we're going to be in trouble in Murfreesboro. I think none of us are really sleeping on Middle. So, I mean, we're going to have Joe Spears on one of the Middle Tennessee beat writers about that. But I mean, we've said it before. They're going to stack the box. They have Blankenship, who's been at Middle Tennessee for, it seems like, longer than Brent Stockstill's been at Middle Tennessee. Their star safety there. Really good defensive player. And we're not going to be playing an offense that's not going to be able to put points on the board. Middle Tennessee will score eventually. And even against this really good FAU defense, it will happen. That's just because Asher is just too explosive. He's a playmaker.
And they don't have to score 34. This is a game where, like, if you're Asher O'Hare, I got to get maybe a turnover, we score, maybe get 10 points off good field position, and then I got do a couple Asher O'Hare drives where I convert a couple 4th and 5s, 3rd and 5s where I dive and pitch the ball and kind of grind their way, and I get 20 points and we win 20-13.
They literally
that's
by 20 points last week. Exactly.
Yeah, it's exactly how they're thinking. And plus, we're kind of talk about this. I mean, and we talked about this. We'll talk about this with Joe Spears. Every FAU fans knows this is the ultimate house of horrors for FAU. If it can go wrong in Murfreesboro, it's going to go wrong. We're going to get the bad call. Like when Devin had that first down and they gave Devin Motor Singletary the terrible spot in 2018, which led to the Stockstill. You guys remember the review?
Yeah. I try to block most of that out, dude.
Yeah, and then the Stockstill throw. I mean, I even totally forgot about the game where we blew the 14-point lead with under 5 minutes to go in Charlie Partridge's first year. We all know the Hail Mary game from back in the day. So it's just, it just feels like that game where I'm going to be watching it and I feel like something's going to go wrong, right? Because it's just, that's what happens when we play Middle Tennessee.
Yeah. And especially when you have a young quarterback. And again, like we mentioned, an offense that's still trying to find its identity, that doesn't really know the playbook that well.
Yeah. I mean, if we do win this game, build a statue of Willie Taggart, because any coach that can get a win in that Murfreesboro and
yeah. I mean, FAU is one. We're 5-12 against Middle, and we've won one time in Murfreesboro, which is the miracle in Murfreesboro from 2004. It took a miracle for us to win in Murfreesboro. Like,
and we weren't even FBS then.
Yeah. No. I mean, I think you've got to again, anything can go wrong there. But I do kind of have a little bit more faith. I do have faith in the coaching staff. I think that they will, now that they have had, likewise UMass had a week of tape for Javion Posey. I think Middle's going to be studying that tape as well to mimic a lot of what we do. I trust our offense, our offensive coaching staff to make those adjustments as well.
The thing was, though, here's the thing: the plays were against UMass were there to be made. It's not like they're going to drop.
That's true.
I mean, they were there.
We could out-talent them.
Yeah, you could go in and you could redraw up and make some adjustments, but Javion Posey has to see TJ Chase running across the middle, going like this, arms in the air on a 3rd and 11.
Yeah.
The Michael Irvin kind of pop pass play. You got to hit, even though you're under pressure. Man. That's the design of that play. You're just bring everyone to me. You're going to be wide open. You got to hit that. I mean, that was frustrating. You got to make those plays. I could tell you there's countless times, and just football is a simple game, people, and FAU does run pretty fun route schemes. If you're at the game, you can kind of see how they kind of run. I would say it's a little bit even different than what Lane runs. There's even a little bit more complex. But man, when UMass has plain man coverage against a former 4-star Clemson player, you guys be able to throw the ball up and get it. That's it. Like, you're just asking for it. Like he did at the end of the game. He finally hit one. You just got to hit that 2 times in the beginning of the game and make UMass go, okay, right? Like, we can't do this.
I mean, the key is just going to be to avoid mistakes, avoid whether it's the missed pass when we're trying to extend the defense north and south, and limiting turnovers. If Posey plays like Driscoll, then we'll be fine. If he tries to play like Posey at FIU a couple weeks ago, believe it or not, we couldn't be in some trouble, because I don't think the rushing game entirely is going to get the job done. As much as I would love for that to happen, it's not going to do the trick, because we know Middle's going to stack the box after watching film from the UMass game.
Yeah, and then I do want to give we've talked mostly about Posey, but again, give it up for the defense. Give the defense a huge shout out, because we finally got those a turnover. There was that I joked that there was one play where we had 2 opportunities for an interception.
Oh, yeah. I wrote it. It's been comically close.
Yeah.
It's not like they haven't deserved turnovers. It's been, Amon Ross had one where he was halfway to the end zone thinking the ball was in his hands and turned around and it just went. He read the play all. Roman Munchen. I mean, he had 2 more. He's been 2 inches away from having 10 interceptions this year.
Yeah,
it's. And, shout out to David Bevlin, long time out. This is his 5th year here. Finally got an interception. Good for him on senior night.
Yeah. Again, another game where we did not allow a touchdown, which is amazing. I mean, like this FAU has had some amazing defenses. It's kind of sucky that this is the season the season that it is, but it's pretty impressive no matter what you say.
Quick question, maybe our fans can help us out. I actually tried to do a little bit of research. I didn't want to go down the full rabbit hole. When's the last time FAU had a safety? Not we got a safety. Like they blocked a punt for a safety. When's the last time FAU's been on the losing end of a safety before this? Anyone remember off the top of their head?
I want to say Marshall. The last time we beat Marshall in 2017.
Oh, we ran it out of the end zone. Yeah, that's right.
Out of the end zone.
Good one. Okay, I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was on purpose. So
2019's game against Marshall, we actually gave up another safety as well.
Okay, so that's the last one.
So the last time I think we scored a safety was probably Tulsa 2014?
Buffalo at home, 2015.
I mean, I'm trying to block that game from my memory.
Yeah, there's a lot of blocked games in your memory.
Basically the entire Charlie Partridge years, except for that one FIU win and the UF loss in overtime.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's Buffalo. Well, if we're wrong, any fans, feel free to tweet at us and correct us.
That was like the 5,000 degree game too. That was
Yeah. All right. So we'll I guess wrap things up recapping the UMass game, and we'll move ahead to Middle Tennessee. So please enjoy this interview with Joe Spears from Middle Tennessee. All right. And as we've done so far this year for just about every single game, we are fortunate enough to have a beat writer from this week's opposition. In this week, we have Joe Spears, who is one of MTSU's beat writers. Thanks, Joe, for joining the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I guess I've been leading everybody with this question is, can you just kind of give us a summary of this year's Blue Raider squad?
Yeah. So it's a weird group. They started off the year with 2 blowout losses to Army and Troy. They got a shutout against Army 42-0, and then they lost to Troy 47-14. A lot of offensive issues early on, which was kind of shocking because we kind of figured that would be the strength of this team coming back. Asher O'Hara is back. A lot of their skill guys are back. But they turned it over a ton early on. But then they go into conference play. They lose to UTSA by 2 in a game that's kind of back and forth. They had a lead. UTSA took a double-digit lead. And then at the end, they just kind of the same issues at times. Asher's really progressed, I would say, from those first 2 games, but the offense as a whole, especially in the running game's really struggled this year outside of North Texas and last week against Troy, but just kind of an inconsistent team. They're not, I wouldn't say they're as bad as their record shows, but it just seems like they can't win. Like they had North Texas beat. They were up 28-14. North Texas inserts Jason Bean into the game, and he just runs all over him. Triple doink against Rice. That was a heck of a game. And then Marshall, that game was actually 7-7. They were driving down to tie because Marshall went up 14-7 right before they were driving down to tie the game at 14, turned it over. Marshall immediately scores after that, and then the route is on. So I don't think this team is as bad as its record shows. Defensively, they played really well. They've just been put into some bad positions. But I think last week's win over Troy was a huge stepping stone for them.
Yeah, we were all watching that game against Marshall pretty closely down in Boca. Joe, you were talking about Asher O'Hare. Shane and I, we've been talking about this all year long. I am probably the president of the Asher O'Hare Stan Club. I've been trying to get Shane on board. He might be warming up to it. You talked about his progression this year. Remember that blowout against Army in West Point and how there was a lot of turnovers. And then all of a sudden, they played Troy a second time. And the offense is somewhat improved, still not at, what we're used to seeing from a Stockstill type offense, but something better. So what has changed over time from that blowout to Army to now the offense starting to find its identity? And in particular, what has Asher done differently?
He's cut down on the turnovers. That's the big thing. I mean, he turned the ball over 5 times total in between those losses. I think he had 4 interceptions and a fumble. But he's reading progressions much better. He turned the ball over against UTSA, but he also threw for 350 yards and had 3 touchdown passes, also ran a 1 and 2. But he's just playing smarter football than he was in those first 2 games. And I think getting benched in both those games really took a toll on him. I think that kind of opened his eyes of, you had this great season last year. The record 4-8, it wasn't great, but you yourself had a great season. But that doesn't mean you're not susceptible to getting benched. Now, Tony Franklin, the offensive coordinator, said he regretted benching Asher for those 2 games. But in hindsight, you really look at it, I think that helped him. I think he's really played well. Against Western Kentucky, he was all of MTSU's offense. The run game wasn't there. They lost that game 20-17. And if he got some help, they would have beaten Western Kentucky. I would argue that they probably should have. Against Rice, he had a great game. Against North Texas, he finally got some help in the run game from Shaton Mobley. Last week, he ran the ball 25 times. I mean, they rely on this kid a lot. He's not the greatest passer. He's not Brent Stockstill where he can just sling it down the field. But he's a dynamic runner. And I think he's also – I think the biggest thing that Asher, he'll admit this, is he's not – his first read isn't to run anymore. He'll actually look for receivers. He didn't do that a lot last year. This year, he's got guys. Jaron Pierce has emerged as a great receiver for him, very consistent. Yusuf Ali has really opened my eye. He's been incredible too. CJ Wyndham was great. They lost Jimmy Marshall for the year due to an injury, but they've got the guys, and it's just a matter of Asher getting the ball to him, and he has been. It's just, can they get the run game going to help him, and that just hasn't been there this year.
Speaking of run game, it does seem kind of like Middle Tennessee's biggest weakness this year has been stopping the run. It's the one thing I actually feel confident about going into this game for FAU, that, with FAU's kind of offensive struggles with the young quarterback, that they can just lean on the run, similar to what they did against FIU. Has that gotten any better? It seemed like it improved from one game to the next with Troy. All to me, that swing is kind of impressive. But it just seems like everyone else has just run for whatever they wanted on Middle Tennessee.
Yeah, I think it has. I think maybe since Rice, the run defense has been better. I know Marshall ended up with 185 yards on the ground in the end, but they held Brendan Knox under 100 yards. They really did well last week. I mean, in that first meeting, Troy ran for 240 yards on them. Last week, they held Troy to under 100 yards. So I think the defensive side of the unit, they're playing better. Especially, you look at this year to last year. I mean, it's like a completely different team. a lot of what they've had to deal with is the offense, especially early in the season and against Marshall, I guess, as well. But turning the ball over or having a quick 3 and out and immediately having to go back out on the field. That's what really killed them in that first Troy game. But I think over these last 3 games, it would have been interesting to see how they did against Charlotte, but that game got postponed. But I think you look at these last 3 games, and especially, like I said, against Marshall's averaging over 200 yards a game on the ground. And for the first 3 quarters, the run game wasn't there for him. It wasn't until the end where the defense is just kind of shot from being out on the field so much that Marshall really did their damage.
Humor us, Joe. Is Brandon Knox overrated? Real quick.
I don't think he is. I think
man, you would have been right home with us, brother. You would have been right home with us.
I think I don't know. Like I said, they held him in check both this year and last year, really. He didn't rush for 100 yards against them last year either. So I don't know. I think he's a good running back. I really like the kid out of UAB, and I can't remember his name. Spencer Brown. I really like him. I like his game a lot. We haven't gotten to see a lot of him, obviously, this year with COVID. But I don't know. Brendan Knox, he wasn't their primary focus on the ground in that game. And I think MTSU really game planned to slow him down after seeing what they've seen him do this year.
Do you think that's something that we could see Middle try again this week? I mean, they saw the success UMass probably had when it came to stacking the box, a lot of stunts in the front 4, really just plugging in between the tackles. You think you'd expect Middle to do the same thing this week, to really hone in on stopping the run?
Yeah, I think they will. And I think they trust the secondary enough to do their job at this point. You got Greg Great, who's really emerged as Reed Blankenship. We all know what he can do. He's been a staple of this defense for a while. But Greg Great, in my opinion, has been their best defensive player this year. I mean, he's been all over the field making tackles. I mean, he made that transition from corner to safety so seamlessly. And they really – what was that?
I was just going to joke. Reed Blankenship has been at MTSU, I think, since FAU won the Sun Belt.
Yeah, he's been there forever. It has been good to see him back after that injury he suffered last year.
That was horrible.
That was a brutal injury. He's outside of that Army game and maybe Troy, where he was still getting his legs under him. He's been incredible this year. But I think I agree with you. I think they'll make FAU earn the run. They'll make them earn it. They trust their secondary enough to do their job, and I think last year that was really a big downfall for them. Is you got the FAU was able to pass on them. They were able to run, just kind of do whatever, and turnovers really played a key in that game as well, from what I remember. But I think they really trust this front 7. Stock's been impressed with how they've played these last couple of weeks, and I mean, statistically, they're playing much better than they did last year. It's just kind of like I said earlier, this defense, I think they've just been put in a bad situation time and time again. Scott Schaefer has done a great job with this unit.
Joe, you've been covering MTSU for a while, and we were joking about before we kind of hopped on this podcast how, especially in Murfreesboro, it has been just anything that can go wrong for FAU has gone wrong for FAU in that stadium. Do MTSU fans kind of realize that, notice that you guys had a 9-game winning streak over us where, you know, and we all know the games that have been mixed in. We talked about it earlier, the Hail Mary game in 2008, the Austin Grammar comeback with 2 touchdowns with a couple minutes to go, you know, the Stockstill game, you know, and then everyone remembers, you know, Middle Tennessee scoring 77 points, just going Wildcat.
Right.
Triggered.
Oh. Yeah, I think it's kind of, they know. I don't know, because I feel like you really look at FAU over the last couple of years, and FAU's really turned into a staple of one of the best teams in Conference USA. I mean, Lane Kiffin really changed things there, it seems like. And now this year, I mean, outside of that Marshall game, kids have played well. So I don't know. And I think these last couple of years have been trying times on MTSU fans. They're not used to seeing this team have a losing record like this, you know, and they're used to them playing those Power 5 teams and losing those games. But now you're seeing losses to Rice last year at home. That was an unexcusable loss. You lose to just teams you really shouldn't lose to. You lose to North Texas this year and last year. Those are games you don't see lost very often. You lost to Western Kentucky 2 years in a row now in games that were close, but you're not winning. So I think it's kind of a mixed bag right now. You're seeing kind of an inconsistent team. I know my Twitter feed when they're down is it's something. And it's been a lot of that these last 2 years.
This begs the $1 million question. And do I even have to ask it?
Here we go.
This has been something MTSU fans, it seemed inevitable at the beginning of the year, but it seems like MTSU always does this thing where they just do enough.
Right.
Are we going to see a change in Stockstill this year? Is it kind of time? Is this just what MTSU football is? Or
And
is it
is there
just they're just happy being with this?
Is there enough financial might to make a change?
Right. Yeah. Because he's got that $5.86 million buyout, which is it's a lot, to say the least. So, personally, I don't think there will be a change this year with everything going on. I think unless you're in just such a dire situation to get rid of your coach, I don't know if you're winless at this point. If MTSU was winless at this point, if they had lost to FIU, if they had lost to Rice, if they had lost to they had lost to Troy last week, I think we'd be really looking into that. But also, I mean, I talked to Stockstill 4 weeks ago, and I asked him, I said, are you guys viewing this as a mulligan year? He said, no. He said, I'm frustrated with how we struggled too. And honestly, since that North Texas game, it seems like a completely different team. They're not all the way there. They're not going to compete for the Conference USA title right now. They're not there, but they've shown improvements. And outside of Marshall, where the fans were upset with that result, I mean, if you really look into that, I mean, it was for that first half, it was close. And then Marshall's done what Marshall's done all year and blew things open. But I think I understand the frustration from fans. I hear it all the time, fire Stockstill, all this other stuff, yada, yada, yada. I get it. If my favorite team was struggling like that, like they have been the last 2 years, I'd get it. But you also have to look at the fact of rebuilds happen. This team still has a bunch of talented players. They're going to get a lot of those guys back next year because of everything that's happening. And you also have to look at the fact that Brent Stockstill was here for a long time. He's the most successful quarterback in program history. I mean, he's the best player in program history, I'd say. You had Richie James here for a while, and Richie James is in the NFL. You have all these great years under Stockstill, but you also have they haven't won a conference championship yet. You have the losing record in bowl games. So I get both sides of it. I really do. But I think you won't see a change this year. It'd be interesting to see what happens next year. But again, the financial side of it too, it's just not there.
Yeah, definitely a real challenge for that program. Joe, we appreciate you being on with us. For FAU fans or anybody listening that wants to hear a little bit more from you, where's the best place for that?
I'm on Twitter all the time at Joe_Spears7. You'll see a lot of MTSU stuff and occasionally high school stuff, but just follow the MTSU stuff.
Well, it might be good to check out what's going on in Murfreesboro and
that's true.
High school football.
For now, yeah. We'll see how long it lasts.
All right. Well, we really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll have a pretty entertaining game this weekend.
I hope so. I think it'll be a good one.
All right. We hope you enjoyed that interview. And we some more exciting news. Different sport basketball season's right around the corner. Jack, what do you got for us of that?
Yeah. So basketball is finally here. Starting Monday, they're going to be playing South Alabama, an old Sun Belt Conference foe, who's going to be looking pretty good in the Sun Belt this year. That game's going to be Wednesday night. We're going to be having coverage on the Owl's Nest all week long for this. After South Alabama is Jacksonville State, then an NAIA team before the Owls come back to Boca. So interesting season. We will be playing UF later on in the year and NC State as well. So some big names as well. Once again, pinch me if you heard this. It's Jalen Ingram's team. We just got to see if we can find a new number 2. If it's going to be Mike Forrest or someone else. It'll be fun season, hopefully.
Have they I'm sorry if I'm completely oblivious to this. Are they allowing fans at home games in any capacity?
Good question.
they-
That I do not know. We're still working through the process of getting credentialed and everything. So I don't know if even FAU basketball knows yet.
No, all right.
I do know that they're taking this quite seriously, and they're trying to figure out a way to make all this happen. I think there will be some fans, but I think there's also going to be some separation from the court and the fans, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is all speculative at this point, but I don't think fans will be entering courtside at the Burrow like they used to. They might have to sit up top in the upper deck. So we'll see. That's all speculative, but considering how we're dealing with the press credentials, we're not going to be allowed on the court.
All
so
right.
you can kind of put two and two together.
Got it. All right.
Put you in those cool suites.
Yeah, those aren't bad if you've been in there before.
I
And you
went
get
to an
a
alumni
nice
event
view of the
in
brand new
those.
video board as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we appreciate you guys joining us during this episode. Always appreciate your feedback and you tagging along with us. So as always, make sure you're checking out FAUOwlsNest.com, following all of us on Twitter, and remind that you can get this podcast everywhere. FAUOwlsNest.com, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify. We're like just under Joe Rogan. It's like Joe Rogan podcast inside the Burrow on Spotify. So if you look at us there, you'll find us. But Google Podcasts as well. So we always appreciate it. You joining us, and we will see you guys next week. Go Owls.